there are a few minutes in Monster Mania history that are just stone cool. This is one of them. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the Dark Lord of the Sith. Mr. Prowse. Governor Hansen, God bless you, back again, and Don Shanks. I suspect this is going to be the easiest show that I've done. Who has a question? We'll start there.
I have to agree with this gentleman right here. This is pretty cool. So this is awesome. The baddest guys on the block right now on this panel. So my question is for Gunnar Hansen. Can you tell us a little bit about your role in the upcoming Texas Chainsaw Massacre? And kind of like what it's about?
Well, I can't, they won't let me say much of anything. I can say that I'm actually playing a character in the film, and if you know the first year, then I think there's a certain irony.
Mike's not working.
Right there.
Okay, I'll talk a little bit.
Oh, man. Anyway, there's a certain irony in the character I play, especially in the lines he delivers. So I think for those who are fans of the first movie, I hope the irony of it comes through. And I took the director aside when we were just starting to shoot and said, can I do this one thing in the scene? Because it will remind everyone about something about Leatherface. And he goes, okay. So we're going to do that. Otherwise, I can't say much except that, I'm in the early part of the film, and I was really impressed with the effort they made to capture the feel and the tone of the original Chainsaw. And this is a true sequel to the original. It begins seconds before the first one ended. So it picks right up from the end of the first Chainsaw. Yep.
Hi, thanks for all being here. Mr. Shanks, you're obviously known as Michael Myers, but what is your favorite role besides being Michael Myers that you enjoy doing?
Well, I've done close to 350 movies and TV shows, so it's like, what's your favorite child? But, playing Nakoma on the Grizzly Adams series, I played Uncas in Last Mohicans on TV. One of the things I'm known for, though, too, is getting kicked in the nuts by Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber. I mean, that's one of my claim to fame. But, and playing the Hook in Always Always Be Last Summer. And then the Killer Santa Claus in Silent Night, Deadly Night. Well, I was considered the stunt double, but the guy, couldn't walk and chew gum, so I got to do it all. I kill like a champion.
My question is for all three of you fine gentlemen. What are your favorite kills?
Okay, my favorite one wasn't in the movie. We filmed it and they thought it was so graphic that they couldn't show it. We got an X rating when we from the Halloween 5. But the one guy that finds me floating down the river, takes me in, does the tattooing on me, does this incantation over the body. And on Halloween Eve, I awake and put the mask on, pick him up over my head, break his back. I throw him on the altar and I put a rock through his chest. And I love to see that, you know. But that was kind of one of my favorites. If you, one of the Fangorias, they show his name is Theron Reed, and he was a punk comedian in Salt Lake. And he's holding the skull, and he's got the mohawk cut, and he's in one of the Fangorias. But that's the only thing I've seen on the, you know, on that kill.
Killed it. I think lots of people tried to kill me. But I don't think I've ever killed anybody in a movie, actually. I did a terrible movie for Russ Meyer out in Barbados. It was called Black Snake. And I always remember one of my final deaths was there. Because I was writhing on the floor, grasping at my stomach. Because all my intestines were all coming out everywhere. I think they gone down to the butcher's and got all these offal and things like this, and covered me in all this stuff while I was writhing on the floor. No, I don't really. I think I can't remember. Did I kill anybody in Star Wars? I wish I killed C-3PO, but I mean.
The greatest movie villain in modern movies has never killed anyone.
You killed Obi-Wan.
Did I kill Obi-Wan?
You killed Obi-Wan.
Poor Larry Guinness. Yeah.
Well, my favorite kill is, can you guess? Franklin. Because during that filming, Paul, as you probably know, Paul Farquet, who played Franklin, was really afraid of losing his character, so he became Franklin as soon as he arrived on the set. And he would stay in the wheelchair all day, and then he would not stop being Franklin until the end of the day. And so that scene where Franklin is fighting with Sally over the keys and then going down, she's pushing through the woods. The only two lines in that are scripted are, there's a light up there, wait, I hear something. The rest is just the two of them bickering while she's pushing through the woods. So it was such a pleasure to kill Franklin because he was off the set.
Well, I've got one, and that is David.
Yes.
The first time I actually ran into your work was with another one of Monster Mania's favorites, and that's Clockwork Orange. Can you tell me about working with Kubrick and Malcolm McDowell, who's in here just about every other week, it seems like?
Well, the Clockwork Orange was quite an interesting experience for me. It was, first of all, what happened was I got a phone call, and it was from Stanley Kubrick's office, and they said, can I go up to Stanley Kubrick's house up at L Street, near, very close to L Street Studios. So can I go to Stanley Kubrick's house to meet up with him when he wants to see me about possible parts of the movie. And I live about 2 hours drive from Stanley Kubrick's house, and so I drove up through the afternoon and got to Stanley Kubrick's house at about 6 o'clock in the evening. And I sat there and I waited, and it got to about 9 o'clock. I was still sat there waiting, and then a message comes through saying, "Terribly sorry, Mr. Kubrick has been detained on set, and can you make another appointment?" You see. So I thought, well, so I had to chase all the way home, back home, another 2 hours drive back home, made another appointment to see him the following day, and exactly the same thing happened again. I chased all the way up to Wall Street, got out there, and the message came through after I'd been waiting about 2 hours, saying, "Very terribly sorry, Mr. Kubrick is detained on set. Can you make another appointment?" So I thought, listen, I'm not going to do this again. So I turned around to him and I said, well, I think the only time Mr. Kubrick is not going to be involved in the filming will be 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, unless he's got a church. which I don't think he was going to church anyway. And so I said, I'll come up on 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. And of course, well, at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night, and there he was waiting for me. And we had a little chat, and he gives me a page of the script, and he says, can you read this line? And it was only one line, and I read it, and he said, oh, I can tell you the acting. I said, well, no, it's only one line, actually, there. And anyway, then it was, he decided, I think he'd seen something or other that he liked, and decided, well, I'll offer me the role. And it was the role of the bodyguard, the character, Julie, was the bodyguard to the writer. And I had two marvelous scenes in the film. One where I carried Malcolm down the stairs, and Shanks put him down when he came into the house after getting out of prison. And then the second scene was when I had to carry Patrick McGee, who was the writer, down the stairs in his wheelchair. I always remember I'd done this scene with Malcolm and Darth, and we must have done it about 10 or 15 times before Stanley Kubrick was happy with it. And then it took me about 3 days to get over the scene. My arms were aching like mad. And then I get the call to go up to see Stanley again about doing the scene with Patrick McGee. And he said, this is the bit where you're going to carry Patrick McGee down the stairs in his wheelchair. And I said, whoa, I said, hang on a minute, hang on. I said, your name is not One Take Kubrick, is it? He said, and everybody, oh my God, it's called in One Take Kubrick. And then anyway, he sort of smiled and he said, well, we'll do it as quickly as we can. Well, I think we shot it in about six takes. And very, very nice part for me. And then at the finish of the film, he said, look, I thoroughly enjoyed working with you, and now you're up in the Elstree area and you want to come around the house for tea, you're more than welcome. So I went out there a few times, had tea with him and his secretary, and things like this. Formed a nice friendship. And years later, only about a year or so ago, I was doing a big show in London, and a woman came up to me, and she must have been in her sort of 40s, and she said, oh Dave, she said, nice to see you again. And I said, when are you seeing me again? I said, I've never met you. And she said, oh yes you have. She said, I used to come and watch you film when I was younger. Is it? And I said, what do you mean? Can you come and watch me filming? She said, I'm Stanley Kubrick's daughter. And she used to, when she was 7, she used to come to watch the filming. And I said, well, you're about 40 now. I said, how do you expect me to recognise you? But I think Stanley used to let her come to the studio and watch what was going on. It was a great experience working with them. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
First of all, I'd like to say it's an honor to be in the same room with all three of you, and I'm completely starstruck right now. I grew up loving all of your characters, and I'm going to stop myself from fangirling now. My question is, how does it feel to kind of be icons in your industry? Because in the horror industry, you guys are the faces of some of the most iconic characters. Even people who aren't into horror films know who you are, or who your characters are. How does it feel to be a part of that?
Well, when we come to these events, you make us feel very special. You know, I mean, if it wasn't for you, I mean, we would just be out there doing our job and not knowing that anybody really appreciates what we do. You know, but I gotta say that, you know, I appreciate you people as much as you appreciate what we do. And as far as being an icon, my wife doesn't think that I'm any kind of icon.
I'd say you were never an icon. You were always brought down to work very, very quickly when you come home, and you go out and do things, and it's like go out and do conventions, and I mean thousands and thousands of people like that, and I go home all quite excited about the interest which has been shown in my career and things like this, and what I've done, and I go home and my wife, puts me in my place straight away. But it's quite strange actually, because my family have never been all that interested in my career. anytime any interest is shown, because I have a grandson and a granddaughter. They're now 17 and 15. But when they were younger, as I said, the only time that anybody showed any interest was when they knew that I was coming to visit them. They lived in Cambridge, about 50 miles away from where I live. And when we were going to visit them, all the kids' schoolmates, everybody at the kids' school, knew that their grandfather was Darth Vader. So when I eventually got to their house, they would have a great long list of names that they wanted autograph cards for. And that really the only interest that was ever shown by family. My own children really showed no interest in Star Wars whatsoever. And my wife always feels it was a great, what should I say, invasion of our family life, being Darth Vader, because a lot of my life now is devoted to traveling around the world doing conventions and things like this. And I think she's beginning to get very concerned that I'm spending more time traveling around the world than I am staying at home. So it's a bit of a problem.
I'd have to agree about you're only an icon when there are people around you who think you are. And so it really is being at the conventions that any of us get in. I get a sense that people really love my involvement in this movie. When I'm home, I'm the guy in the village that nobody thinks has a job. And that's pretty much, except when I'm an icon in the village I live in is about every 2 years. I live very close to an elementary school, and I'm really surprised there's no restraining order. But I live very close to this junior school, elementary school, and there'll be a point where I notice if I'm walking to the post office and the kids are coming out of school, they'll stop and they'll go. And they're all kind of like this. And after a few days, there'll be one kid, usually a boy, who gathers up his courage and he walks over to me and says, "Mr. Hansen, were you in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre?" And I'll say, "Yes, I was." And he'll go, "See, I told you."
I have a funny story. When my oldest son was real small, and he was going to this little play school, and everybody was telling him what their daddies did. And they came to my son, and they go, "What does your dad do?" He goes, "I don't know." And I go, "Well, where does he go to work?" He goes, "I guess he works at the airport." So you're never, an icon in your own home.
This question's for all you guys. Right here. Oh. Right here. What's the funniest thing you guys remember that happened while recording? What? What's the funniest thing you guys remember that happened while recording?
Funny. You mean anything or on the horror films? Well, I had Jim Carrey bite me in the nuts. And I had to slap him because he used my scrotum for a punching bag. I guess that was kind of funny.
Nothing funny ever happened. Well, wait a minute. There was something that later seemed really funny, and that was that we had very small budgets. We had a caterer who would bring us our lunch. And in the film business, you also have what's called craft services, which is a separate service that always makes sure there are just snacks around. Well, because we didn't have much budget, basically the caterer provided craft services. So whatever was left over from lunch was the snack food for the rest of the day's shoot. And it being 1973 in Austin, Texas, one day our dessert was two very large trays of marijuana brownies. And looking back, it was kind of funny. And you can see it, there's a moment in the film where you can tell, and what happened was we're all eating these brownies for dessert, and we're all getting very high, and then what happens is, you know, an hour later, you're kind of coming down, and you're feeling a little hungry, so you go over, and you forget that the brownies are spiked. And so, like, all day long, we're eating these brownies, and apparently, a friend of mine was on the set, and apparently, when we're waiting for a setup, I'm sitting on the porch of the house with my chair tilted back and my feet up on the rail, and this friend of mine swears that I was staring off into the blackness saying, "Time has no meaning." So what you can see in the movie is in the scene where Leatherface cuts the door down, we had two cameras. We had a camera out in the dark, sort of shooting the scene from behind, but then Daniel Pearl, the cinematographer, the director of photography, was on the floor in the hall of the house. And he had the camera on a little hi-hat looking up at me. And I was supposed to break in through the door, look for her, and realize that Sally has run up the stairs, and then go up the stairs after her. The problem was, I was really stoned. And what was worse was, the cameraman was really stoned. So what happened was when I kicked in the door and stepped into the room, the cameraman, thank goodness he left the camera running, jumped up and ran out of the room. And I'm so stoned, I'm desperately trying to remember what I'm supposed to do. So what happens is I stop and I watch him leave. And I think, oh, wait a minute, and then I run upstairs. Now, we only had one door, so we had one take to do this. So if you watch the scene, Leatherface comes in and he goes, "Oh!" like this.
I had it's not very funny at the time, but it's funny when you think about this particular sex thing that happened. We were around Barbados doing a film called Black Snake, which was a Russ Meyer film. And Russ Meyer was having having all sorts of problems with one of the actors, a guy called Bernard Boston, who was giving him all sorts of trouble, you see. But when they decided that the film Black Snake was basically about a snake which was terrorizing the people, the natives on the island. And so what they did, they got special permission to bring a python into Barbados. There were no snakes in Barbados at all. And they got special permission to bring this big snake in, you see. And it was kept in a box in Russ Meyer's house. He had a sort of big house on a hotel lot. And there was a place called Sandlord's Castle. We all had individual houses. And so Russ had this big python in this box, you see. So, one night, Russ had this big row with Bernard Boston, and Bernard Boston had gone off and went down and was on all sorts of drugs and got as high as a kite, like down in Barbados and down in the main town. And he decided he would break into Russ Meyer's house and release the snake. See? This is a huge big thing like that. And so this is what he did. He got a taxi up to Russ Meyer's house. Russ Meyer was out, and he got in and opened up the box and let the snake out. And an hour or so later, Russ Meyer was coming home from where he's been, and he runs over what he thinks is a hose pipe in the road. And it was only the snake. And fortunately, it didn't do too much damage to the snake, but apart from made it very nasty. And from then on, they had terrible problems working with the snake. The snake didn't do anything at all. And Bernard Boston and Russ Meyer fell out completely. It was a terrible situation. But it was you can just imagine this running over this snake in the middle of the road. And I'm thinking it's a hose pipe, you know.
more of a comment than a question. I just think it's really incredible you guys made these icons pretty much through body language, who either didn't speak, grunted, or yelled, or was overdubbed by Simba's dad from Lion King. I just was wondering how you feel knowing that your icon was kind of mute, or something like that.
With Star Wars, I had to learn all the dialogue, deliver all the dialogue, and deliver all the way all through all three movies. But it was very sort of plain from right at the very beginning when we did Star Wars that everything that I was saying was coming through the mask and was obviously no good for reproduction purposes. You see, so I automatically assumed that when they got to the end of the movie, I would probably go into the sound studio and re-record all my dialogue. And that was what I fully expected. And then, of course, what happened at the end of the movie, they raced back to America because they couldn't get all the special effects as they wanted. And when they were in the States, George had to make a decision as to whether to bring me all the way over from London over to Hollywood to do the voiceover, or alternatively, and of course the possibility of my dialogue might not have been to his liking. Or the other alternative was to hire probably one of the best known voiceover artists in the world, which is James Earl Jones. And I think they weighed up and all to the cost of getting me all the way out to Hollywood and not possibly being so James Earl Jones won over in the finish. I think he made a wonderful job. I think it was absolutely fantastic. I actually saw him, I met him for the first time in 30 years. We've never met before. I tried to meet him once when he came over to London to do a film. He was doing a play called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and we made arrangements to meet up. And we had to wait. We had to wait for the play to finish. And then when it was finished, unfortunately, he couldn't get out of England because we had what we call the ash cloud, the Icelandic volcano erupted, and the Arctic. All this clouds.
I was taking credit for the ash cloud.
Yeah, the ash cloud. And anyway, we made arrangements to meet, but at the time I was available to go to meet up with him, the ash cloud had gone, and they whisked him back to America. And then I tried to see him again when I was in New Jersey, and that didn't work out very well because I phoned his son up. He said, "No, George, don't come to see him after the play because he's very, very tired. It's a very, very long play, and he's very, very tired." And so then of course he's come over again just recently to do Driving Miss Daisy. And so his son rang me up and said, "How would you like to come out and meet him?" And I said, "Yes, I'd love to." So we went out, my wife and myself went to the matinee performance. And after the matinee performance, we went into his dressing room after, and we spent about an hour with him. It was really absolutely terrific. Nice seeing him for the first time and working, and seeing the guy that's the voice played. It was a really nice experience.
I have to say, I told Dave this. I loved his performance as Darth Vader because of setting the voice aside, the enormous power in the character physically. And I just was so impressed when I watched Star Wars, and simply the message conveyed by this guy just by the way you walked, just by the way Dave walked through a room, through a scene, or moved his arms. I thought it was the best acting in that movie. And I sincerity is the secret to success in Hollywood. And once you can fake that, you got a man. Here's that $20 I owe you.
Hi. I know that, Gunnar, you probably have some things to say on this subject. I'm going to ask all three of you.
Are there any least favorite days you've had on a shoot? Is there any day that you were like, if I could have that have never happened, you know, I would just wish it away?
No. I worked with an old special effects guy. His name was Harry Wallman. And he was one of the original Keystone Cops. He was in silent movies. He doubled Clark Gable. He doubled Charles Lawton, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He did 6,000 movies and TV shows. And he says, I don't regret one day of my life. And I try to live my life just like he did.
I don't think I've had any sort of regretful days. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself most of the time. I can't really think of anything that I've really had any sort of horrific days. Although I guess you do these monster movies and you've got terrible makeups and terrible costumes and things like this. But it's you put up with the deprivations of all that. And you're very happy to be able to work, to be perfectly honest, most of the time.
Well, I know how I'm going to answer it. 26 hours. Well, I thought everybody would get that. The 26-hour shoot. The one day when we're shooting in the house, we shot for 26 hours the dinner scene, and because it was 100 plus outside, and we had Duvetino with and all the windows were blacked out and a lot of lights on, it was probably 120, 125 in the house. It was so hot that the food we put on the dinner table was rotting in front of us. They had to keep changing it out. They had a cooler with fresh head cheese in it and sausage. And that was absolutely the worst day of the filming of that movie. We were completely exhausted. At one point, Dottie Pearl, the makeup woman, looks at all of us because Toby and Danny Pearl, the cinematographer, are arguing over how to light a shot. The shot is 3 seconds long. They argued for an hour on how they're going to light this shot. Dottie Pearl, the makeup woman, looks at all of us sitting in the living room, in the dining room, and she says, "We've died and gone to hell." And I think we all agree with that. But it was just a miserable shoot, and we had to do this scene over and over and over again because he wanted 2 master shots to cut to, and they had to time out exactly the same for some reason. And then he wanted all the close-ups and the 2 shots and all that stuff to match, so we just, I don't know how many, I think we ended up having to get about 10 perfect takes so they could cut the film together for that dinner scene. And Marilyn was screaming, and it's the only point in the movie where I actually forgot I was in a movie. And there's a scene at the end, right at the end of the scene, when we're trying to kill Sally, and we got her head in the bucket, and we're trying to get Grandpa to kill her. And Grandpa keeps dropping the bucket, and she's getting banged up on the head. And finally, she jumps up and runs for the window. And Ed says, "Kill the bitch." And it's embarrassing because I always separated myself from the character. In that moment, I'm looking down at the spot where she was, and I think, that's right. I looked up. I mean, I was there. I looked up that direction because I was looking to see where she was and how many steps it was going to take to grab her and break her neck. And I looked up, and I reached for her, and that broke that spell. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, it's a movie. And there was that moment, and it was the creepiest feeling because you don't ever want to become leatherface, not in your head, you know. It's just, as they say now, it's not a healthy place to go.
Might have been those brownies.
They were good brownies.
There comes a point where a person like me has to take control because there's a question that needs to be asked. David Prowse. Darth Vader, the Dark Lord of Sith. Anakin, little Annie, little Annykins. I know you're on George's shit list already. What do you think of what Darth Vader kind of retroactively became in the movies? Do you agree with the story, or do you think it probably should have went another way?
I personally think that Darth should have been bad and stayed bad. Yeah.
But it was a good bad.
And you know, of course, he is the Dark Lord of the Sith. But you know what the Sith is doing? You know what the Sith is. What is it? It's an anagram. If you rearrange the letters of Sith, what you get? That's right, he's the Dark Lord of the shit.
But if you had been good, you wouldn't get the greatest line in film history. Kiss me, Anakin. Kiss me like you did back on Tatooine.
This is for Don. How was it working with Donald Pleasant?
He was the consummate actor. I mean, he was the most polite, you know. I mean, Peter O'Toole said that he was the finest actor in England. And, you know, working with him was just, you know, he's very quiet, but to the point. You know, one night, it's after I've killed Wendy, I wrecked the car, you know, I killed her, and they had signed me out for the night, and he came to my dressing room, and he goes, could I ask a favor of you? I said, yeah, okay, what? And he goes, well, I need to know that you're out in the woods, because he's supposed to be there, and he says, I know you're out there, Michael, I know you're out there. He goes, could I impose on you to be out there? I don't need to know where you are, but just to be out there. And I go, yeah, sure. You know, and you know, he was just such a pleasant guy. The one scene though where he beat me up with the 2x4 and he shoots me with the darts and puts a chain, as we're laying on the floor and we're dying together, or supposedly, he's laying on top of me and the sirens are going, the lights are going, and he goes, oh, I get it. I abused you as a child. And if you watch it, my chest is going like this because I'm laughing. But no, he was a very nice man. I'm sorry that he's gone.
This is a question for Don. I remember hearing somewhere that you and the rest of the casting crew for 5 were supposed to do number 6 as well. Do you have any information about that, like what it was supposed to be, what the plot was?
Well, I started doing these, matter of fact, when Gunner the first time I did one of these conventions, they had called me and said that, you know, they were going to do part 6, and they wanted me to come back and do the Michael Myers. And when we were filming the scene where I take off the mask, and the chair comes down and all that, they're shooting all this other stuff, and I go, well, this isn't in the script. And they go, well, it's going to be in the part 6. And I go, well, what is it? And the guy, the dark guy with the silver boots, you know, with the silver tips, I played him too. I'd go out one door and come around and come back and have the coat on, and you know, have the tattoo. You know, we both had the same tattoo. And Dominique Godard, the director, said, well, in part 6, you're going to be both parts. I go, oh. He goes, that's why we're having you take off the mask, so that when we see you, it'll be like a split screen, and you'll be both parts. So it's sort of like the Raising Cain type of thing. I mean, this is what he was hoping. I go, okay, you know. But for some reason, they got into a contract dispute, you know, with Danielle. And it was over a couple of $1,000 bucks, and you know, they rewrote everything. And you know, I mean, it went from being me, being the dark guy, to a black guy. And I was like, okay, you know, I don't get this at all. So, you know, but that's what it was supposed to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, for every stone cold moment of excellence here at Monster Mania, there's always this announcement. Guys, we could do this all day and it would not be long enough, but we've got to stop it now. I know, but time and the show marches on. Ladies and gentlemen. Oh yes, look who's here. Finally. Well, come on up and say hi to everybody.
guess I didn't time that too well, did I?
You always make an entrance.
Ladies and gentlemen, all too soon. And I really, really mean I hate this. Let's thank Kane Hodder, Gunnar Hansen, Don Shanks, and David Prowse.
Just before you go, would you all like to sing the Star Wars anthem, which has been written especially for the Star Wars actors? And if I'll just go through the words with you, and you sung to the Star Wars theme. You all know the theme now. Well, the words go: Star Wars, make me a fortune. Paid off the mortgage, bought me a car.